So I'm Jennifer Durillo, and this is Maria Alfonsi. We are both professors in the English department, and we work closely with So Say We All. I actually serve on the board of directors for So Say We All, and I actually see a couple of our other board members in the audience. Could you guys stand? Nancy and Jessica. I saw you. So Say We All was founded in 2009, and it's a literary and performing arts nonprofit organization. Their mission, or our mission, is to create opportunities for individuals to tell their stories and tell them better. We have three core priorities: publishing, performance, and education. So our students tonight, all 6 of them, have been through a month-long rigorous process. And this process really required a lot of workshopping, revision, performance coaching, one-on-one mentorship with our lovely faculty coaches. And I'm going to ask them to stand up really quick. Faculty. So the process was a blind submission. So all the students, no one, the names aren't on their stories. So it became like this really competitive pool. There were so many really, really good stories. So the selection process was super difficult and actually broke up some friendships. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. It was really just, no, I'm kidding. It was only like 2 marriages.
It has been an honor to see these students grow so much in such a short amount of time. We watched in admiration as these students became totally invested in each other's stories. Never having met before, they gave and received feedback with such respect and generosity and compassion, strengthening their ties to faculty and to the Mesa College community. They are from very different backgrounds and English levels. We have ESOL represented, 47A, 101X, and 205. They're all very well represented here. I would like to thank the following for their generous support: President Pam Lester, the Humanities Institute, the San Diego Mesa College Foundation, Basic Skills Initiative, and the Basic Skills Student Outcomes Transformation Grant, and their wonderful faculty members who helped coach these writers. Our amazing intern, Bianca Sanchez, will kick us off by introducing our first performer.
Hello. Before we start the show, we have some important notes for the audience. First, we would like to request that after the show, you please fill out the survey on your seat and return it to the black tray that's in the back of the room. Second, we want to note that it's important that we don't censor content or language, so some content may be inappropriate for children. With that said, we are going to start our show. Our first performer is Jacob Crosher. Jacob is raised in Central California and Bay Area. His writing is influenced by the struggles that he has overcome as a young man growing up in a broken home. After overcoming his experiences, he has achieved the title of Veteran of the United States Navy. Jacob is working toward his bachelor's degree in science and plans on transferring to medical school. So please welcome Jacob.
Crowd tonight. As I lay in the bathtub, head throbbing and ears ringing, I could feel my clothes drenched in what felt like sweat. I couldn't move. Everything hurt. But I knew if I could open my eyes, I could attempt to put together what had taken place. The cool porcelain felt comforting as it caressed my cheek, and I lay there in what felt like death. Or maybe this was death. The ringing in my ears slowly faded and was greeted by muffled voices slithering under the door. My eyes twitched until I was able to muster the strength to perform such an easy task any normal person would never consider to be so difficult. Darkness. My heart was beating at what felt like 100 miles per hour, and I could feel my breathing grow more and more rapid by the second as a wave of panic washed over me. My lungs were burning as I choked down the still, musty cigarette laced with what tastes like burnt plastic air. My insides were melting. And as though I was coming to the end of a long tunnel, the darkness began to recede and granted me my vision once more. My best friend at the time, Venus, a 4-pound Yorkshire Terrier, was curled up on a towel in the corner staring at me, shaking and scared. I struggled for several minutes to pull myself together and emerged from the porcelain casket and stumbled over to the sink. Looking into the mirror, I was confused as to whom was peering back through the glass prison, starved and corpse-like white skin accompanied by dark circles around the eyes. Looking down, I find a small baggie that had several morphine pills and crushed powder-like residue next to a crystal meth pipe. Immediately grabbing the pipe still full of the glass rocks, I set flame to the bottom of the pipe, and it melted into a pool of godly nectar. Smoke protrudes from the small hole on top of the bubble. Inhaling the rich, milky white smoke instantly made the pain in my body subside, and in those seconds, I had risen from the dead. Looking into the mirror once more, I said aloud to myself, "Holy shit, I almost died from an overdose." Those words echoed in my head while the corpse in the mirror glared back at me, and I reminisced as to how I got here. Stockton, California, 4 years earlier. I was 15 years old at the time, and my mother had thrown me out of her house after her bad breakup with my abusive stepfather. She wouldn't admit to it, but she too struggled with her own meth addiction. It was blatantly obvious with all the new, sketchy faces running in and out of the house, all hours of the night. Stockton isn't a place where you live. It is a place where you survive. Get stuck, or you were just unlucky enough to be born there. Crime is through the roof, and there are no opportunities for a better life. Being from California, you know about Stockton. It's like Compton, and anybody from Stockton will tell you the same. If they don't, it's because they don't know any better. Eddie was my brother's best friend. He was the first person to introduce me to the devil himself, and despite everything I was told about drugs growing up, I still succumbed to walk the endless plains of hell. Days and nights blurred together from excessive partying and drinking. It was New Year's, and I tagged along with Eddie to a mutual friend's house. As all other parties, we would drink like we were sailors, and I would make my way to the bathroom, where the entire evening would be regurgitated into a mind-riddling headache. Sometime during the period from start to finish, I was unaware that Eddie had vanished from the house. This was odd because when we were together, we were chained to the hip. Usually I would muster up the strength and energy to adventure out and look for him, but for those who have been lucky enough to truly experience a hangover, you'll understand. When I came to the following morning, Eddie was still nowhere to be found. I searched the house, and I asked remaining people if they had seen him, and still there was no luck. I patiently sat on the couch and waited for him to return. The day was already hot, and the sun glared through the windows, taunting my eyes. The house smelled of cheap booze and quarantine from the pool outside. Enduring the day for what it was, and daydreaming about life, I heard the front door squeak open, and I shifted back into reality as Eddie walked through the threshold. He didn't look like himself, though. His hair was a mess, and he appeared to be wide awake. His eyes were so big that they looked as if though they were going to pop right out of his head. His pupils were dilated to the point where the color vanished from his eyes, and I was staring into a black, lifeless void. "Where the hell did you go?" I asked him. "I was at my friend David's house. We shot up crystal meth." He said this seriously and lifelessly, with no remorse to his voice. Distraught by what I had just heard, all I could do was look at him in what felt like a standstill moment in time. "I'm going back if you want to come along." He said this in what seemed like concern, but he was so high, they were just empty words, and I didn't know this yet. On the long drive to David's house, my nerves started to get the best of me, and I began to rattle some questions off in my head. What is this going to be like? Why am I even coming along? Will I try crystal meth? When we arrived, I was still feeling sick and miserable from drinking the previous night. My head was aching, and my stomach twisted and turned like I swallowed an amusement park. When we walked through the back doors, the sweet smell of burnt plastic penetrated my nose, or what fake smoke from a smoke machine smells like. When we entered the room, the walls were lined with blankets. Needles were spread out over the ground next to some burnt tinfoil, and a glass pipe that looked like a long white mushroom. The door clicked behind me from the lock. Immediately, David shrouded the door with the blanket, as though the light's presence was not welcome in this magical realm. We sat down in the triangle as though we were getting ready to summon an evil spirit. David and Eddie both resumed smoking, taking long, deep drags and blowing tremendous amounts of rich, white smoke, like dragons. The pipe came to me and I took it. I mimicked their behavior and perched my lips to the pipe and set flame to the bottom. My body tingled, my headache subsided, and I felt a wave of euphoria wash over me, and I was wide awake. I continued to inhale, holding the smoke in for several seconds, not wanting to let any of the magic escape. And as I exhaled, Eddie and David both disappeared in a cloud of creamy, white smoke, and I could feel the sweat begin to beat on my forehead. I was on cloud 9. This God-forsaken pattern continued for the next 3 years. I met terrible people who lived miserable lives and have lost everything: children, family, houses, jobs, respect, their lives. I found myself in terrible places like crack houses and waiting for my friends, as they wrapped up the trick they were pulling for more drugs, to buying drugs from many different people I have never met before. Slowly, this drug was holding my hand and walking me into hell, and I was willing to go. The high was too amazing to care. And those times in which resembled me caring were more of an internal battle, only when I would gaze into the mirror to plead with the monster that had taken over. But the praying did no use, and in my solace I would slowly resemble begging, not for forgiveness, but for freedom, as I kicked, screamed, clawed, and bit, only to remember I was a prisoner behind the glass bars. And like everybody else who bargained with the devil and losing everything, I was forced to move to Oregon. That's where my mother ended up, sometime during my bender. I was too high to have noticed anybody else's problems. When I arrived in Oregon, my mother was still doing the same stuff as when I left 3 years earlier. I inherited her and my father's screwed up genetics. Russian roulette between my mother's heroin addiction or my father's meth addiction. Out of 6 kids, I was the only one lucky enough to inherit this help, but God only gives those what they can handle. There was no point living, or at least that's how I felt during this dark period of my life. Feeling as if my life was going nowhere, I receded from reality, and the drugs became a crutch to veil the pain. A pain that would grow so heavy on my shoulders, I would find myself in that bathtub. I dragged myself out of the bathroom, and there were my roommates. Jacob and Heather looked unfazed, and he said to me, "You're alive." I asked him, "How long was I in there?" Heather immediately shot me a look. 2.5 days. We're surprised you're standing here, honestly. Shocked, I asked, "And nobody bothered to call the paramedics or bust down the door?" Jacob said to me, "We've all been there. You're an adult. Get the fuck over it." When I heard this, I was shocked, and I thought to myself, I can't do this, and I won't do this. I need to break this cycle. What's one more dead junkie? Nobody cares now while I'm alive. Who would care if I was dead? I care. I grabbed my few possessions, but mostly my best friend, Venus the Orchid, who was still lying there, curled up on the bathroom floor. When I picked her up, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror one last time. The world seemed to stand still for the last time as the devil and I stood there, locked in each other's gaze. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, or the aftermath of the overdose, but it was a bitter goodbye, and I heard the voice inside my head tell me, freedom is not free. It is earned through pain and suffering. Hell is no place for you, little bird. Spread your wings and be free. Free from this pain that you have been running from. And although I cannot do all the pain, I shall let go of your hand, and now your peace may come. After the devil and I said our piece, I walked out the door. I looked at Venus, and I promised, I'll never touch that shit again. I swear to you and to myself. Walking to my mother's house, I barged in without notice. She looked surprised, and before she could even get a single word out, I curled up on her couch and dreamt of a better life.
That was Jacob Crosher. Next up is Matthew Messina. Matthew was originally from San Diego. He was an infantry soldier in the United States Army from 2008 to 2013. He is currently a student at Mesa College. Please welcome Matthew.
The heart-pounding sensation from the blood racing to my face from embarrassment took over my body's function. Stripped to bare skin and handed a uniform while the cold morning floor shot through my feet as I stood in this unfamiliar space. Shortly after that, I found myself pierced from the cold, muddy water as I rolled around in a pit with 60 other random people. Every day we had that panic, gasping desire for air that left a copper taste in our mouths and a knife in our sides from running. That taste only went away if you threw up your food from the meal before. This was boot camp. As the weeks went by, we started to bond, especially when someone would find how much they hated running or how much they missed home. That bond was limited to nothing more because everything here seemed forced and unfulfilling. Maybe it was the drill instructors yelling, or maybe it was the green human-shaped targets and fake explosions during training that gave it that Hollywood effect. It always drew up to that one question that left everyone empty and silent. How would I act in a real firefight? A couple of years after graduation and deployment to Iraq, I found myself sent to Fort Drum, New York. The platoon I was assigned to didn't hesitate to remind me of my red hair through crude humor as the hallways echoed, "Looks like we got a ginger." Of course, being the new guy again, I had to prove myself to a platoon who had already deployed together and established that unbreakable bond of brotherhood. I never cheated with extra rounds at the shooting range like Nerd and McDonald from the platoon. When it came to running on the track field, I could beat anyone except Lieutenant Steele because he obviously made a deal with the devil to have the speed of a cheetah. It still wasn't enough trying to be a good soldier. That would not earn me my spot with the guys. I was too straight and narrow like a Boy Scout, which made me untrustworthy. It's why I still wasn't being invited to go out drinking or hang out with anybody in the platoon. And one day, I found myself crawling in a cold, muddy ditch for back-talking the brigade sergeant major. All I saw was two guys waving for me to come over from the Humvee as I was relaxing. I raised my hand up with a lit cigarette and yelled, "Give me a sec, I'm smoking." The echoing response was, "Get the fuck over here now!" Fear pushed my body to run as quickly as possible because I knew I screwed up. And that was probably the end of my Army career. To justify my actions, I couldn't see his rank, and me being the new guy in the unit, I had no idea who he was. I thought it was a couple of idiots lost on the training field looking for directions. But the next day I had everyone from the company come and ask, "What did you do?" It all ended with laughter at my own expense and a few push-ups. It seemed to bring me closer to everyone as if that was the beginning of my initiation and acceptance. When winter came, we would build snowmen together with over-exaggerated private parts, which normally got us in trouble with the First Sergeant. I finally understood that you had to be a little mischievous and even criminal at times to earn their trust. It signified that you were willing to go outside of the norms and values to support your platoon. I started getting invited to go out every weekend to the bars. I even got invited to my buddy Nerd's wedding with the rest of the platoon. It started to feel like I was part of the platoon, and I finally met a group that was worth my sacrifice. 2 weeks after arriving in Afghanistan, we made it to our little combat outpost in the town of Nawruzi. Our welcoming mat consisted of 2 A-10 Warhogs firing long bursts that shattered the ground and clouded the valley with dust. All I could think was, "Welcome to Afghanistan," and that's one less person we had to worry about. The next morning, I was caught off guard when my current squad leader, Sergeant Slaughter, was fired after a mental breakdown, and that I was chosen to take his place. I tried to turn it down because I had never trained for the position and I didn't feel comfortable. My platoon sergeant told me, "Just look around the platoon. You're it, Messina." And just like that, I was in charge. I was now responsible for the lives of my friends. My frantic mind raced with questions, and fear caused my body to freeze in the middle of this unfamiliar place. I felt the necessity to start cramming information about the area and practicing different scenarios as if I had to test the next day. The panicking fear from the possibility of someone dying because of my lack of leadership skills haunted my mind. It took a few weeks of nonstop patrols and battle drills before that fear turned into confidence. I started getting used to my new call sign 4-1 and everything else involved with the leadership role. It wasn't until Lieutenant Steele was killed by an IED when I realized the magnitude of this valley of death. I remember everyone's face trapped in that same stunned look, as if they were paralyzed from trying to fight back those forceful tears that showed their emotions like I was. I wasn't sure what I should feel dim about. The fact that he was gone, or the wife and 1-year-old daughter he left behind. The mixed emotions of anger and sorrow darkened our hearts and clouded our judgment. But that day tied us closer together as family because we started to see the value in one another. Multiple cracks rattled my eardrums as I yelled, "Contact left," and returned fire. My squad was caught in a near ambush that left us trapped between 3 walls and surrounded a small field. We were pinned down by machine gun fire from multiple positions 35 meters away. The only cover we had was an 8-inch wall of dirt that was used for irrigating the fields, while the enemy had a 3.5-foot wall. My machine gunner McDonald couldn't get into the fight at first because he was pinned down. So I sprinted towards the next available cover that was 15 meters up to draw their fire and have another advantage point. McDonald began to gain fire superiority and suppress the enemy. So I told Santa Maria to 203 that fucking wall. Move up. Set. McDonald, move up. The second McDonald stopped firing his machine gun to move up, 2 men started running towards the village from the wall. Santa Maria and I began to fire. To the left of us was another mud wall with an open doorway with men trying to flank my squad. Williams lit up the doorway with his machine gun and drew them back. Santa Maria and I moved up to the wall we were getting hit from. We set up a perimeter, checked for bullets, and cross-loaded ammo between the squads. After the smoke had cleared, the only thing that we found was expended rounds from the enemy's positions, which we collected for fingerprints. My buddy Williams blew his knee out trying to assault forward, so it was time to go home. We talked about the pros and cons of the event and how we could improve for next time. About 4 hours later, we got a report of 2 guys being dropped off at the local hospital with multiple gunshot wounds. One bled out, and the other one was arrested by the Afghanistan police. They identified the body as the village elder's son. We began to celebrate with well-deserved cigarettes and eating our favorite MREs that we stole from the cooks, while everyone squabbled about their perspective of the ambush. The squabbling consisted of ruthlessly criticizing each other with vulgar humor of who got the kill, who had no idea what the hell was going on, and Williams pretending to hurt his knee so he could hide. You can stop faking it now. The bad guys are gone. Williams' only response, "I hate you guys." Lieutenant Rondo even showed us his assault pack that was full of bullet holes. They must have really hated the backpack, sir. Yeah, maybe don't bring it next time. We laughed so hard that our sides started to cramp as our eyes teared up. That day awakened a hint of life and death for me. It showed me how swift death would come and how to value each given moment in life, especially as I held on to the memories of Lieutenant Steele. The next day, we were coming up on a funeral ceremony with an old guy burying someone with a pile of rocks. As we got closer, we noticed that it was a village elder and his 3 sons burying the man we killed, his son. It left this eerie tension among both sides, like a standoff, as we, the killers, passed by the funeral. Their body language told us that their minds were clouded with the same anger and sorrow we felt for Lieutenant Steele. We knew to get ready for tomorrow, and sure enough, tomorrow came heavy. Family should be close and comfortable enough to roll around in the mud together. When you find somebody worth the sacrifice of your own blood and your own tears, you fight for them. This is how I inherited my family. 4-1 out.
That was Matthew Messina. Next up is Zainab Faraj. Zainab was born in north of Iraq. She came to the United States with her family in 2016. She is living with her 3 kids and husband in San Diego. She is currently a student at Mesa College. Please welcome Zainab.
It was really early to wake up, especially in the morning of a new year. I moved to turn off the alarm. When I opened my eyes to turn off the button, I saw my message on my phone. Today is your birthday. Happy birthday. Today is Sarah's birthday. Today is Muhammad's birthday. Today is Kalsum's birthday. Today is Amjad's birthday. I paused for a while and I said, Happy family's birthday. All my siblings have the same birthday. Maybe my mom was so smart to organize this. To make a birthday party for all of us in the same day. Easy, right? However, the reason she did this is because we didn't have any birthday certificates, and it was hard for my mom to remember every day and every month for our birthday because we are 5 kids. So I never had a birthday party. For me, it's not important because when I close my eyes and I think about the past, there's really bad history in my life. I cannot remember any birthday party or any sound of laughing from my mom or playing with kids. But I can. But I can remember something like the apple smell, war helicopters, and the sound of the strong fire. Unlike most children, I couldn't imagine playing with my friend in a dream park. It was so hard for me because what I remember is a dark basement space when we hid from the helicopters. On March 16, 1988, our small town, Halabja, was ready to welcome the new season. We celebrate our New Year's on the first day of spring, and for us, the first month of spring has many meanings. The meaning of a rebirth of the nature, the rebirth of a new life. At the start of spring in our city, you could see the tulips rose in a red color everywhere. So our city was a symbol of a red. Just 7 days before New Year, my mother saw a really beautiful red dress and gave it to me. I put it under my pillow. Red color is my favorite color. Red color had many meanings for me. The color of love, the color of a pretty spring flower coming during the spring, and gave a symbol for our small town. That night, I had a dream in my sleep. I saw myself with rose clothes and dancing with those red roses. And I was sliding on the rainbow. My red dress was matched with the red color of the rainbow. And I was so happy in my dream. But then my mom woke me up, shouting, "Hurry up, we have to go to the basement. The war helicopter is coming." I just woke up and grabbed my red dress and escaped to the basement. I always remember when we ran to the basement, my big sister brought her school bag. Because she loved her book. She was smart one in her class and she always worried about her homework. I remember how one day I just spilled a little bit on her book, so that made Saddam Hussein's picture with. The first page of every book has a picture of Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, and every student have to save the picture. She cried because she was afraid to be sent to jail, or maybe that they would kill her. If you ask me during that time when I was 5 about my dream for the future, I had a strange wish to be a judge. I thought if I could be a judge, I could send our president to jail. Was this a big dream for a 5-year-old girl? I don't know. I don't think for Kurdish people it was a big dream. Kurdish people had chemical weapons attacks them. Anyway, after an hour in the basement, we smelled apple. But it was not the season for apples. Why could we smell this? I felt the smell of apple getting so heavy on my chest. It was hard to breathe. My mother took my hand and made me follow her outside. I left my shoes, but still I had my red dress. The scene was filled with the sound of mothers crying, babies crying. My mother was pregnant and she carried my 2-year-old brother with one hand, and with the other hand she pushed me behind herself and we fled. I cannot forget the view of the city when we fled. It was filled with many people, kids, men and women, and all dead. And I saw dead bodies of a cat, dog, and birds. No living creature survived in the city. Everything died. My big brother went with my father to get my grandparents out of the city, but they never came back. A week later, we found our dad in the hospital, but my brother and my grandparents with my uncle, they all died. I will never forget the old man who shouted, "Save yourself! This is the chemical weapons Saddam Hussein has sent as New Year's gift." It was a horrific scene on the way out of the city. Some children lost their mothers, and some children were crying on top of their mothers who had died on the way trying to escape. I saw one baby breastfeeding milk on her dead mother. We walked and ran about 5 kilometers away from the city. My feet were bloody, and My mom was just pushing me and I fled. I fell. I didn't have any energy to go on. Then I fell down on the ground with my red clothes. And my mom just sat for a while and then she wrapped my foot with my red dress. Then she started to pushing me again. She told me if we were stay here, that Saddam Hussein army would come and kill us. We went to mountains. Yes, mountains. We're friends to Kurdish people. When they wanted to hide from Saddam Hussein, we fled to the mountains. By the time we reached them, it was late around 3 p.m. My mother had no more energy. She fell on the ground. And the weather was very cold, and my mom tried to make a fire, but the wood was wet. My mom looked in my sister's school bag. She looked at my sister, who had carried her precious bags all the way, and told her, we have to use your book to make the fire. But my sister just moved her head and said, no, no, no. When my mother opened her book, the first thing she used to make the fire was Saddam Hussein's picture. I will never forget my mother's eyes when she uses that picture to make the fire. Her eyes were full of hate. I saw the same look in my mom's eyes when Saddam Hussein was executed. Many bad things happened to Kurdish people simply because we speak different language and we have a different culture. We were sure that Saddam Hussein died, but we are not sure about the future of our kids. When I was 5 years old, I asked my mom why our president attacked us with chemicals. My mom answered that she didn't know why. She took a deep breath that was filled with a sadness. Then she talked softly and said, because we are Kurd, he wants to kill us. It wasn't incomprehensible to me. Just in one day, 5,000 people died. 30 years after what happened to us, my hand is still going to shake, and I'm not sure I can write anymore. But I know my pencil can do it. 1, 2, 3, or 5,000 pencils to write 5,000 stories. The story of a pomegranate tree that never wore red blossom, just like me. I never wore my red dress. The story of my big brother who never graduated from the school, or my uncle who never married his fiancée, or my grandmother who never made me a necklace of red tulips. That day was struggle against red color in the earth. After 30 years, my kids still asking me the same question. Why did your big brother die? Why did your grandparents die? But for me, it's not easy. It's not easy to tell them the story of dying people, the story of dying Kurd, the story of genocide. Instead, I will tell them the story of the hope, the story of the faith. I will tell them how we are strong and how we are destroyed our enemy's dream, and how we built our city again, and how the red bird sing a song for renewing our city, and how my daughter can now wear a red dress. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Next is Rosalind Cassidy. Rosalind was born and raised in San Francisco. She is currently studying journalism and hopes to transfer to a 4-year university next year. Growing up in San Francisco has been one of the biggest influences in the way she writes, and it has shaped the woman whom she is today. Please welcome Rosalind.
I fucking hate country music. As the bedroom door opens, it lets in the smell of whiskey, cigarettes, and the light sound of Garth Brooks playing in the living room. I pretend like I'm sleeping in hopes that this father would see us in a slumber and politely close the door. To the left of me lie his son, naked, passed out drunk from the fifth of Old Forester we had inhaled within the hour. I don't even recall falling asleep. I must have passed out from all the whiskey. Since my eyes were sealed tight, My hearing was on hyper mode. I don't hear the door close. Instead, I hear the squeaky noises his flip-flops makes as he comes closer to the bed. He's at the end of the bed, I tell myself as my heart begins to race. I feel overwhelmingly helpless. I, too, was covered only by that stupid white silk sheet. His presence owned the room, and I could feel deep in my gut that something bad was going to happen. I was crying on the inside of my heart, as I often did in my teen years. All of a sudden, I feel a tug at the very end of the sheet. He was slowly trying to pull the sheet off of me. This bastard wanted to get a glimpse of my nude teenage body. I tried to scream. I really fucking tried. Fear swallowed me whole, and I remained as still as that warm Sacramento night. He manages to unveil one of my breasts. I was sick to my stomach. It was time to fight back. There was no way this man was going to get a free show. I won't let it happen to me. So I grab hold of each side of the sheet, and I wrap it up in my fists. We are now playing a game of tug-of-war. My eyes were still shut. My body only defined who I was until I discovered I had a voice. My mother stands at 5 feet 2 inches. She's petite like most of the women in our family. Her legs are short, but her hips are wide and her butt is round and big. I grew up in San Francisco, just on the outskirts of the Mission District. I'm only 8 years old when walking down Bosworth Street. My mother's soft hands are tightly sealed to mine. She is catcalled by at least 4 cars with tinted windows. They cowardly hide their faces behind the thick, dark glass. The sounds of kissy noises and high-pitched whistles echo in the streets. I start to process their actions as typical. "Hey girl, I'd love to get in between them cheeks," one man yells from his beat-up black Monte Carlo. I look up at my mother to try and comprehend whether these derogatory words are affecting her. I see her smooth olive skin, her sunspots, and the wrinkles on the sides of her mouth from her breathtaking smile. She's not smiling. Her gaze is straight ahead, her jaw is clenched, and her nose is slightly flared. Her resting bitch face is so on point. My mother's strength scared me at times. Sometimes I felt as if she pushed her feelings into the pit of her soul, refraining from actually ever feeling anything at all. I wondered if all women did this. If they let the misogyny devour their smiles like the fog that devoured the two of us that day. Behind my smile and behind my bravery were other women teaching me to acquire a love for my body. My sister is 8 years older than I am. I always looked up to her, even though she wasn't much of a role model growing up. She was perfect in my eyes. Her thick, straight, long, blonde hair made me want to cut all my dirty brown curls straight off my head. She had this pale, soft skin that I absolutely drooled over, and I've never seen eyes as blue as hers. When she would go out to party, she wouldn't come home until about 6 in the morning. While she was out, I would sneak into her room and parade around in her rave clothes, try on her fur coats, and lather my face in her concealer that was clearly not my color. But I didn't care. I felt like a real woman, whatever the fuck that meant. I stand proudly in front of her mirror, looking at myself with a love so pure. I point my finger directly at my reflection. "I love you," I whispered to myself. But it wouldn't be long until society convinced me otherwise. One weekend, while my family and I went up to Lake Tahoe, my 14-year-old sister was allowed to stay behind. She was supposed to be taking care of the house. "I'm trusting you while we are gone, Natalia," my mother spoke sternly to my sister as we packed all our snow gear in the white Mitsubishi. Without hesitation, my sister gave my mother the confirmation she needed. "Mom, you have nothing to worry about, I promise." As my mother got in the car and buckled her seatbelt, I heard her mutter something under her breath. I don't have a good feeling about this. I swear if I could rewind time, I would have begged my mom to force my sister to go with us that weekend. But I was a kid, and there was white fluffy snow waiting for me just 3 hours north. I only know what happened that night from the stories my parents told me, or from drunken nights when my sister offered up her broken heart to me. Our 3-story Victorian-style home was packed full of over 200 people that night. There was chaos. My sister had invited a few friends over that decided to call their friends, who decided to call their friends, who decided to call their friends, until the house became a ginormous violent party. There was graffiti on all the walls. Almost all the windows were smashed out. The glass from broken Old English bottles filled the floors. Our television set was demolished, along with a brand new computer we had just got. And my stuffed animals were buried in a big hole someone had dug in our backyard. In total, there was over 30 grand in repairs. But money could not replace the trauma my sister went through that night. Her life changed as a group of guys lured her into my mother's room. 14 years later, and I finally know the brutal truths of that party. My sister and I are both drunk at Bourbon Street when she opens up to me about the secret she desperately tried to hide from the world. As our server drops our dangerously strong drinks off at our table, my sister goes on to tell me that a group of guys raped her that night of her party. One by one, those animals raped my beautiful blue-eyed sister. As I polish off the last of my drink, a tear slips from the corner of my eye. It's all that I could let go because I'm not sad. I'm fucking angry. My sister has a 10-year-old daughter, and she is the warm breeze that wraps around us on those cold, damaged days. Her smile and her contagious laughter is the cure to our pain. She is a constant reminder that although these men might have silenced us, they damn sure have not buried us. I've been given this body, and it often feels like a goddamn curse. There are some times when I want to return it. Just give me a different body. Take away these tits and you can have this ass because I don't want them anymore. Every day I make a conscious effort to hide my exterior. If I show too much cleavage, I take the risk of an old creepy man staring at my boobs. If my shorts are too short, people might think I'm a whore. Sometimes I change 3 times in a day just to please the idea in my head of what a woman should dress like. I take a long look in the mirror every morning, searching deep into my soul, asking myself, where is the love I had when I was a kid? Where did all this love disappear to? Because I want it back. I've been conditioned to accept these societal norms that make it okay for women to be stripped of their beauty and power. It's just so natural for me to conform to the rules put in place for me long before I was here. Sometimes I do it unconsciously. A woman's body is so beautiful. Whether you're short, tall, round, slim, petite, or thick, our bodies are our sanctuaries. To the men that catcalled my mother, to the animals who raped my sister, and to the father who violated my innocent body, fuck you. I'm no longer paralyzed by that memory, but I wonder how many women out there are still rooted in their pain. Because it is the truth in your stories and the strength of your voices that have built the foundation we need to stand together and fight back, to be our own protectors. Our harbored anger is the most powerful force against the coward in power. So let me tell you that your body does not define who you are. I hope my children and your children are instilled with the knowledge that your mind and your heart are what make women unstoppable. My final tug must have hinted to him that I was clearly not asleep. He quietly slipped his way out of the room. The exposure of one of my breasts was enough for him. I often wondered to myself why I didn't get up and start beating his ass. But he was a big man, and I was a scrawny teenager. After the door shut, I got up, rushed to put my clothes on, and planned my escape from that house. The silence in the living room was my chance to hightail it to the front door. I was almost free when I heard a soft voice call out, "Where are you going?" It was not a man's voice, but the sweet voice of the grandma. I wonder what she would think if she knew what her son had just did to me. "I'm going home." My voice was shaky and my palms started to sweat. She reached down and softly held my hand to hers. Her hands were smooth and warm, and in that moment, all I could think of was my mother. "I'll take you home, sweetheart. Let me get my keys." I don't tell her what happened. I don't tell anyone what happened that night. As she starts up her white beat pickup truck, Garth Brooks blasts through the car stereo. I still fucking hate country music.
Thank you, Rosalind. Next is Cleon Williams. Cleon was born in Trinidad and raised in Orlando, Florida. He joined the United States Navy and served our country for 11 years. He is constantly working on self-improvement and decided to become a Prince Hall Master Mason. He is currently studying psychology at Mesa College. Please welcome Cleon.
Inherited what? You are not judged by the height you have risen, but from the depth you have climbed. Frederick Douglass. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want it? A child shouldn't feel like this. Losing sleep was the last of my worries. If I told you that at 9 years old, I inherited a loud train noise coming from outside my window in the middle of the night. The train from what I used to think was a city away, but was really closer than I thought. Followed by police sirens and flashing lights, then a skin-crawling, eerie silence, to suddenly hearing running footsteps jumping over fences in my own backyard. Followed by untrustworthy cops with shaved heads. Beside them, Uncle Tom-ass black cops with flashlights. You still want to know what I inherited? If I told you that as far as I can remember, my parents worked around the clock. Mom's, a daily 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And Pop's, 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. And that's during the weekdays. Dad detailed vehicles all weekend. He had his own business. Sometimes, Mom showed up the next morning to cash in on overtime. But dinner was ready when I got home. She knew I was going to the courts directly behind our house right after school and ball till I got hungry. But basketball was an outlet for me. So most days, I had to do my homework by myself. But Mom checked it for me when she could because I left it on the kitchen table while I was hugged up asleep with my basketball alone in a dark room. Praying before bed like Mom and Dad taught me to. Hoping and wishing my family made it home safe. And praying that I was to remain safe. Basketball was an outlet for me. Let me jump back like 2-3, me and MJ, and explain to you why basketball was an outlet for me. Imagine not having a true friend at 10 years old. Not completely from this country because I was born in Trinidad. And trying hard to fit in. But an honest heart gets me hurt. And showing loyalty gets me betrayed. All of a sudden, and a minor depression in my neighborhood, everyone with sour attitudes, my neighbor, JP, takes a step to take me under his wing, shoves a basketball in my hands, and teaches me how to pass the rock, teaches me how to trust, how to share, how to accomplish tasks, and dig deep and somehow finish goals. Conversations with JP consisted of mental pain and punishment, but somehow encouraging. I remember sitting on the curb in my own front yard, across from his yard, conversing. I used to always feel ashamed to ask questions because he always had a weird way of explaining things with more questions right back at me. Jared Preston used to teach me people skills. But the funny thing about Jared, most people only knew him as JP, my neighbor. Man, we stuck together like glue. When tough times came about, JP used to tell me all the time, when you're upset, you don't beat yourself up. You practice and practice until you're in tears because all you want to do is touch the nets. Teaching yourself desire and passion in your own way. It wasn't about wanting to be in the NBA or some great D1 college. Kids who had financial support had those dreams. In reality, it was about making the other kids in the neighborhood love me. It was about giving my parents another reason to smile. It was to show my neighbor that everything he was teaching me on early Saturday mornings and late Sunday nights would pay off for the greater good. If I told you that I inherited from a basketball from a friend across the street, would you believe it's just a basketball? If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that my dad had a GED education, but somehow created his own business detailing cars? And that was my summertime job, whether I liked it or not. My second skill was attention to detail. Just like a pocket pass off a pick and roll, you would have to pay attention or you might miss something. You would think it was just washing cars. Sometimes moms even question my dad like, why are you pursuing such hard work? But it wasn't just washing cars. My dad had a different view of life, a different vision and perception that taught him optimism. Oh, that taught me optimism. At least I can say that opportunity in America is a real thing. Easier for some, hard for most. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want it? At 14 years old, going to school was hard for me because not only did Tangelo Park supply the school with that minority 25% black population in the school, we were also bused to school. It was just us. Going to school every morning was hard because either I was getting into a fight or looking forward to seeing one. Police brutality and black-on-black violence is a real thing in the neighborhood called Tangelo Park. The land of Disney, you know where Mickey Mouse is from? Florida has a lot of it going on. More than half the people in my neighborhood never been there. But my AAU basketball team played at the Wild World of Sports. Basketball was an outlet for me. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that wisdom started at an early age? Having to learn how to catch the city bus home after high school basketball practice, seeing all sorts of people on the city bus will build your character and culture shock you every day, whether you like it or not. But like I said, basketball was an outlet for me. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want it? Adulthood, right? You would think it gets better. If I told you that personality traits that I have are a gift and a curse, to be able to have enough courage to talk to any woman, it feels like if I can sleep with her, persuade her to cheat on my husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, or even join in on threesomes. And it's not because I'm handsome, and it's definitely not because I'm well endowed. Would you still want to know what I inherited? I believe having this ability called charisma is a curse. I've seen in magazines when I was younger that black men were displayed as world sex symbols. If it was up to me, that would be the last thing people think about when they think about black men. When they see me, I want them to think of a CEO. If I told you that I inherited a life just being black, dark-skinned, a Negro, or a nigga in America, you have to have excellent credit scores compared to everyone else because a good credit score ain't good enough. Growing up, I always heard that all people are created equal. But when you get old enough to realize that isn't true. At least, that's what America taught me. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that my only option was to join the military after high school? Because I didn't see Orlando, Florida as a place of growth for me. The bad part about this is, I couldn't even tell much of my friends. Because the ones I did tell became jealous, tried to start fights, or injure me to slow me down. I made that decision at a fairly young age. At 17. And that nigger mentality that's in all these poor neighborhoods harbors an attitude of digression. Are you starting to like what I inherited yet? If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that most of my friends growing up are either in a jail or on a gravesite somewhere? If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know when I go home now I see poverty-stricken neighborhoods and faces of African Americans being held down by the system? Their mindset will never change because society has told them the extent of their worth only lies in the confinement of the neighborhood that provides no good. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that it's hard to break from this vicious cycle? You know, learning about saving money, like investments, life hacks, and other races seem to have an understanding about. If I told you what I inherited, would you still want to know that I inherited a condition that I have to accept? A condition that isn't fun. Sometimes I'm forced to pretend to act like I'm something I'm not just to fit in. When being yourself aggravates people and all you did was walk in a room, a gym, or a classroom. Better yet, the wrong bar. If I told you that I inherited unsure faces because everything I said was challenged from other races, because they probably think I'm not smart enough to comprehend. The bad part about this is, sometimes I pretend to be silly, slow, incompetent, just to make others feel appreciated. But Marianne Williamson told me it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. So I'm bound to let my light shine. Nowadays, I tend to stay up late and do homework and watch Netflix. And I often catch the comedy shows with names like Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, to name a few. And I've noticed that they've inherited the same thing I had. I've noticed they have charisma. They are outspoken, smart individuals who are completely down for change. They desire that people accept their roles and own up to this tragedy called racism. It's not about equal rights. It's about building children up to be fair and to change the world for greater good. I firmly say, if you're one of those people who are at the top of the food chain and living in a high-class world, don't look down on people who are less fortunate. Give a little advice on how to change their bad situation into a good one. Donate a basketball. It may take someone to the promised land. I inherited a basketball, and it will always have more meaning than just a sport. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleon. Our last performer for tonight is Nastasia De Luca. Nastasia was raised in Point Loma and has spent her summers with her family in Sicily. She has never really written anything about her life until she was given a personal narrative assignment. Writing has always been very easy for her because her life is filled with ups and downs writing it down on paper is a good way to clear it from her brain. Please welcome Nastasha.
I wake in the middle of the night to a scream. The scream that haunts my dreams. That scream. But why do they look at her with such adoration? She's so annoying. She's all shriveled up and red. The annoying endless scream is piercing my ears. I think to myself, why am I here? My dad turns to me, say hi to Angelina, your new baby sister. Great. A creepy, wrinkly alien who won't stop screaming has abducted my 5-year-old life. She gets all the attention, all the love, all the everything. I used to be my dad's little girl, his little angel. Her name literally means little angel. Did they replace me? What's going on? Mission plan. How to neutralize the little devil ASAP. Stage 1, learning how to walk. She was about 2 years old. She can stand up and walk around. Nothing impressive. Occasionally she will fall down, especially if an obstacle is in the way. The obstacle is my foot. This was like the first time we're actually having fun together. I trip her, she laughs and gets up. I trip her, she gets up. I trip her, and now she's crying. Great. What a narc. I try to console her, but my dad comes over and tells me to knock it off. Whatever. I trip her one more time and immediately feel, after I feel a handful of pain through my leg, following a red hand mark where my dad had just scolded me, and a stern voice saying, "Basta." Later, my dad had a talk with me about how she's my blood and we should take care and look after each other. I didn't really concept this at the time. I was 7 and all that really mattered was my blankie, my purple dinosaur, and my TV privileges. My dad was the youngest of 3, so it seemed a little biased of him. Plus Rosalind, who was technically my mother, only biologically though. She didn't seem to mind since she was comatose by 7 o'clock. While we were getting ready for bed one day, we were brushing our teeth in Dad's bathroom since mine was being remodeled. Angelina used to use this brown stool and in red letters that wrote, Angelina, to reach the sink. It was the middle of the night and I went to use the bathroom. My room was down the long, creepy hallway. The closets and doors within the hallway were where the monsters hid. I sprinted down the hallway and miraculously made it. I didn't bother to turn on the lights since they were way too bright. So I proceeded to the toilet when I tripped over something and hit my cheekbone on the porcelain toilet seat. Suddenly, I burst out into tears and my dad quickly came to comfort me. When the light had turned on, I saw what I fell on. I was furious. That stupid wooden step stool with those red letters just stared at me. Angelina did this. She purposely set that up for me to trip. She intentionally tried to kill me, just for tripping her. A revengeful toddler. Stage 2. Stop her from taking everything. It used to be just my dad and I, and of course Rosalind, but she wasn't around all that much since a strong-smelling drink she daily medicated herself with made sure she'd be out by the time I came home from school. But even without drinking, she wasn't all that warm. But with Angelina, they both seemed so together with her. She not only took all my favorite toys and stuffed animals, but also my mom and dad. My dad would just hand everything to her, while I had to clean the kitchen or pull weeds in the backyard to even go see my friends. Angelina even took my favorite sport. Gymnastics was my thing. When Angelina turned 3, she started gymnastics. She wasn't even good. Her somersaults were awful and had poor form. My dad reminded me she's younger and you had been in the sport longer. I was in level 6 and I was 12, while she was now in level 3 and 7. Before going to level 4, competition level, you have to go through pre-team. Angelina couldn't finish her tumbling pass because she was too scared. My coaches were pushing and pushing her to do this tumbling pass. She was anything like me, forcing her won't do it. I wouldn't want to be forced into anything. But even when I was her age, I was fearless, so I didn't understand her struggle. But I did understand how important it was to succeed. I wanted to tell her, you're 7, not a baby, just do the skill. Instead, I approached Angelina and told her not to be scared, that she had the ability to do this, and I wouldn't tell her to do it unless I knew she was able to. After practice, she told me she completed her tumbling pass and moved up. I felt so happy. She did it because of me. My little sister made it to level 4 because she completed her skill, because I gave her the advice, even though now she's closer to my level, closer to me. Oh my God, am I proud? Stage 3, time to grow up. I was 13 when she left. It was cold and cloudy. It was November. I remember only hearing our grandfather clock just tick away the seconds that felt like hours. I saw my dad on the phone. Who was he talking to? I couldn't hear anything but the clock. Tick, her brown hair and hazel eyes. Talk. I woke up and she was gone. Tick, the smell of alcohol as if it was her perfume. Talk. Angelina was asking me all these questions. I couldn't hear anything. Tick, she was so smart, smarter than this. Talk. Is it raining in our house? My face was wet, and I didn't remember crying. Tick, she wasn't strong enough for us. Talk. The clock struck 9:15, and I heard the loud chimes of it. I hear my dad yelling over the phone. I think he's talking to my aunt, maybe my uncle, someone close. Angelina's asking me where mommy went over and over again. My dad tells me to watch Angelina for a little bit, and that he's meeting with someone. Angelina tells me that she's hungry. Great. Now I have to make her food. I hated making her food. She never helped and was so picky. She would only ever eat buttered pasta, and if it wasn't al dente, she wouldn't even touch it. I learned how to cook when I was younger from Rosalind's cookbook. I remember her glass after glass losing consciousness, and having to read what happens next in the recipe, so whatever was on the stove didn't burn. I stopped calling her mom when I was 12, and then she left. So I pretty much lost all respect for her. I resented her for leaving Angelina. She was only 7 and needed a mom. I needed someone there. I figured it out and matured, and Angelina's young, not old enough to be there for her. It's not fair to Angelina. Stage 4, uncling the clinger. Ever since Rosalind left, Angelina had so many fears and problems. I mean, I get it, but come on, grow up. You're 10, not 7 anymore. You don't need me to go downstairs with you, even though I did. You don't need me to turn on or off the stove or oven, and I did turn it off. You don't need me to sleep with you every night until you fall asleep. I did that too. I remember the repetitions of those words, you don't need me. It got annoying, especially when I would want to relax or just be alone. Each time I go on a run with my dogs, she would ask, can I go? I want to tan at the beach alone. Can I come? I'd watch Netflix in my room. Can I watch too? Especially with my friends, she would be extra clingy. Always asking to hang out with us and do what we want to do. I would complain to my dad, and he would say that he did the same thing with his older sister because he looked up to her, and what's better than following your role model around every day and all the time. I could do stuff she couldn't, and it was a wonder to her eyes. It was nice for someone to need and depend on me, I guess. Stage 5, distance. I was a junior and hadn't seen Rosalind since the judge appointed us therapy. Like that would solve anything. She wouldn't admit to anything, and I never thought I cared until I finally computed all what happened. I tried to be strong for myself, for my dad, and for Angelina. I couldn't anymore. I started to not talk to Angelina that much. I didn't want her to see me this week, since I knew she looked up to me. I hated when she heard or saw me cry or even saw my tear-stained face. She would take care of herself now, right? She's 12, not 10. I started living at Nicole's house, who had become my mother figure. I lived there more often, didn't see Angelina or my dad as much. I knew I couldn't admit to my faults, and my dad, he wanted me to be perfect and strong, and I couldn't for him anymore. Nicole made me realize how important it was to have a sibling. She was an only child, and she showed me how special it was to have a sister. I started missing Angelina. By the time senior year had ended, Angelina was 13 that summer. I knew it was time. We finally started talking, and I opened up to her about all the things that had happened. She told me how she wanted someone to look up to, someone to lean on, and I told her that I would be there for her no matter what, and she could lean on me whenever and wherever. So my dad gifted me with a car when I was 18. That's when I started driving Angelina and I to get ice cream, coffee, go to the beach, or hike. We actually started hanging out like friends. I never imagined we would. Stage 6, my little blessing. I would dream that she would somehow randomly die or combust in a fire. I think I was jealous of being an only child, because even the thought of her gone brings me to tears. I wouldn't know what to do without her. I can tell her something and she won't judge, and she can do the same. She asked me for help, and I'm thrilled, unless it's math. We can hang out in my room for hours doing the opposite thing, and it would be fun. We go on hikes into the beach, and we walk our dogs together. Even though we have our fights, we get over it, because she's my sister and my best friend. And last year, we received a little miracle, a baby brother. He was born on my birthday, which was fine. Angelina now has to realize. Angelina has to go through what about trying to neutralize her baby brother, using an elaborate step-by-step mission plan full of revenge plots and murder conspiracies. That would be crazy, right? Who would even think of doing a thing like that?
That was our show. How did you guys like it? We'd like to ask all of our writers to the front, and so that we can
Take photos.
and give you a standing ovation and just stare at you again. All at once. Jacob, Leon, Roslyn, St. Dom. So before you leave, if you can, we would like you to fill out the surveys. We need it for funding. I think our president's still here. And also, if you have suggestions for other kinds of VAMP themes you would want us to think about for the next one. This is our third one. We're hoping to do this every single year, as long as the funding keeps going. So just give us your suggestions and fill out the surveys. Please finish the food. And let's see, what else? Oh, and then one more round of applause for all the writing coaches. If you guys can stand up. Okay, thank you. Good night.